Hey everyone, it's Bob. Welcome back to the show. On this episode of Elevate Your AIQ, I'm joined by Prem Kumar, CEO and co-founder of Humanly, an AI-powered hiring platform that's rapidly expanding from conversational AI to a comprehensive solution spanning both candidate and employee engagement. We explore Humanly's latest product evolution, fueled by a new funding round and 3 recent acquisitions, and how the company is tackling recruiting and engagement challenges across the talent spectrum, from high-volume hiring to knowledge work. Prem shares how AI can speed up hiring without sacrificing effectiveness, and why he's remained a consistent advocate for responsible, human-centric design in product development and fairness in every talent decision. It's a forward-looking conversation that shows how thoughtful innovation can elevate both experience and outcomes. Thanks, as always, for tuning in. Let's go chat with Prem. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Elevate Your AIQ. I am your host, Bob Pulver. With me today, I have the pleasure of speaking with Prem Kumar from Humanly. How you doing today, Prem?
I'm doing well. Thanks for having me, Bob. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's been a long time coming, which is my fault. So I apologize, but I feel like this is good timing because you got a lot to share with me and my listeners. So looking forward to this. We missed each other last week. You were in Nashville. I was here in New York. So I definitely want to get a pulse check on how that event, RecFest USA, went for you. But before we dig in, thought you could give my listeners a little bit about your background, the impetus for starting Humanly, and what you guys are doing.
So my background is primarily a combination of product, data, and HR and recruiting tech. Started my career at Microsoft, where I was on our HR delivery team. So I was a buyer for tools like Humanly. Really, Humanly was born out of my own experience as a job candidate and not hearing back when I sent in applications, going through interviews that seemed kind of unstructured. And what I found is that hiring teams just didn't have the tools to really engage with job candidates at scale. And we wanted to provide the power to talk to everyone, to meet everyone that was applying and then make decisions based on that.
Yeah, I think that's still a common issue of the lack of structure and consistency. And certainly the ghosting has become sort of an epidemic. And I guess it's happening on both sides, right? Candidates are ghosting hiring teams and hiring teams are ghosting candidates. Certainly when I put on my human-centric hat, I would say the candidate is probably most important, ghosting victim to address. I just think it's just disrespectful to not have some way to get back to them and give them, a fair shot. So I applaud what you guys have built so far. So the news this year, I mean, it's just a flurry of activity and some very exciting developments. So I'll say just one big congratulations for all of this, but you've got a funding round earlier this year. You've got some new capabilities around AI interviewing, and you just announced a triple acquisition, as if one wasn't crazy and difficult enough. You did it in triplicate. So take me through, the 2025 so far. There's a lot going on.
Yeah, no, I'll start with a little bit of context on the problem we're looking to solve, and then I can
Hmm. Yeah,
speak to
please.
how this news helps us in achieving that problem. And really, so what we're seeing, so we're generally targeting mid-sized companies or enterprises, and these are companies that are getting lots of application volume, and particularly now where generative AI has made it a lot easier to apply or enter the process. And that was already happening with an Easy Apply, Indeed Apply. The barrier to apply is low and you're getting lots of applicants. So many of our customers are also spending hundreds of thousands of dollars in recruitment marketing, which is oftentimes money well spent. It's working, they're getting the volume, but then they're only able to engage with 5% of the volume. So 95% of candidates are being ignored. So really what we're trying to build is using conversational AI to take a 44-day time to hire and reduce it to about 5 days by engaging with all applicants concurrently, finding the best ones and then scheduling them. From an acquisition standpoint, so we've been growing pretty quickly and did a fundraise to build out more of our go-to-market team, as well as a little bit on the engineering and product side. what we're really focused on with the acquisitions is if it isn't if you're building recruiting technology or TA technology, if it isn't in workflow, if it's not connected to how they work, it doesn't exist, or it doesn't have a right to exist, I should say.
Right.
So we had been very focused on the conversational part, and we still are. So how do we automate a phone screen? How do we automate an AI video interviewer? But we've started to add pieces that make that better. So Qualify was a company we acquired where we feel conversational AI is much more, we've always felt to be much more than a chatbot. It's anytime you're having a conversation for the candidate. So that deepened our channels strategy from a conversational standpoint. And then with some of the other acquisitions like Sprockets, it gives us an ability to get a little bit into post hire, connect to HRIS systems, and actually understand, is the person you hired the one, was this the person with the highest employee lifetime value, the highest impact? Because hiring, like, our job is not just to place someone, it's placing someone that has the highest potential. So lots going on, and it's really, we're progressively becoming more of a full platform for midsize and enterprise companies.
Yeah, it's really interesting. The conversational AI, I mean, are you focused on like high volume hiring, like hourly work, or is it really applicable now beyond that to other, knowledge work and tech talent?
Yeah, so it's certainly applicable to knowledge work and tech talent. We are primarily focused on companies that have roles that are getting high application volume. So it might
Okay.
not be high vol as like, and we certainly sell to QSR hospitality as well. But really, the commonality between all our customers is these are roles that are generally 0 to 6 years experience. So it's like your first job, your second job, maybe even your third job. And they're roles that are generally high turnover. So we're talking support, sales, ops. On the QSR side, it might be someone that works in store at a restaurant, but you're getting lots of volume, not able to engage with it. And as a company, more than likely, you're going to hire someone else next and someone after that. So can we allow you to engage with everyone that you're paying to attract and meet them all? So then you're going to have a pipeline built for your next role. And to your point earlier about ghosting, what we're finding too is if you can get everyone, so usually it can be a 44-day process to do an application, wait 18 days for an interview if you're a good fit. What we're trying to do is allow that to happen in a couple hours. And by getting candidates' questions answered in those two-way conversations, you're less likely to have them ghost later. Sometimes, and by getting there very quickly, you're less likely to have them ghost later. So that's part of what we're going after.
Yeah, I imagine those are important metrics for your clients to track, right? Because that's if you do have that big, recruitment advertising kind of budget, you still don't want to waste it, right? You still want to know and track, sources of hire and really, I guess, instrument every step, every phase, every touch point, right?
Yeah, no, we certainly feel, yeah, if you have 4,000 applicants, if you could concurrently in a couple hours interview all of them, you're going to have a better chance of finding the ones you should send to a person, and you'll know a
Yeah.
lot about them for the next role.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of debate around people's comfort level with interacting with these conversational AI agents. Some find it, off-putting. My contention is people are going to get more comfortable with it, not only because the technology itself is going to be more, realistic, and they just got to accept that this is how the, the industry is evolving. But what's the alternative? The alternative is you have, we're basically giving you a shot and you're walking away from it, right? So like you're going to run out of excuses. You should sort of just get used to it, just like, I don't know, bagging your own groceries or something. I don't know.
No, it's a good question. If we think of AI interviewing, and that's a space that we're very focused on. It's not so much the difference between would I rather be interviewed by a human or AI. It's would I rather be interviewed by AI or ignored. You have a 95% chance of being ignored, or if you're one of the 5%, you're still waiting a week. So what? But at the same time, it is important to give candidates what they need to make decisions. So we have practice interviews, we have feedback, we have coaching modules that they can use. So there's a lot we're doing on the candidate side. And I also think that, like with Chatbot, when we launched that 4 years ago, the same feedback. And the reason the feedback was there, not with our implementations, but historically, candidates are just used to chatbots that just don't work. And if it really truly works and it gives you a higher chance of getting to the next step and is also perhaps less biased than some human scenarios, that those things lead to high candidate experience scores.
One of the other things it seems like you could do is create additional touch points through the process, right? Like you don't have to, let's say a recruiter that's in touch with this candidate is working like, 20 recs. Like the response time, I mean, to your point earlier about, instead of waiting a week, you can just have the next conversation in an hour or whatever. It just seems like you could you just have this like sort of 24/7 availability of essentially a virtual recruiter, or at least a recruiter's sort of co-pilot to sort of guide you anytime you have a question about the status, or just company question or whatever. I mean, would they use this technology, or would your clients just send them to like a career page for those kinds of questions? I mean, how does that work?
Yeah, yeah, and I think even on career pages, sometimes it's hard to find out like what applies to you specifically.
Yeah, true.
And yeah, so we the Q&A piece I think is pretty important, and it is something we provide. And the other piece is, yeah, when I was at Microsoft, I started my career in support, and it was really interesting to see the thing that was most correlated to whether someone submitting like a support ticket with Hotmail gave us a high score or not was not if we resolved the issue, it was how fast we initially got to them. So I think if you're able to get to candidates quickly and answer their questions, you're going to have a high shot at providing a good experience.
When we talk about we get into a lot of these conversations around like automation versus AI, and AI is really the more higher value sort of area as opposed to just productivity. But in that particular example that you just gave, it's actually pretty valuable to have that level of efficiency, because it just dramatically and immediately keeps that candidate, engaged, right? It keeps them moving forward. It helps with, the employer brand, reputation. I mean, there's lots of benefits there that I would say, at least in aggregate, would be high value.
Yeah, yeah, and if they find, it also will allow them to move on faster. So if they ask a question, they find out, hey, the remote work policy doesn't really align with what I was thinking. Maybe it wasn't that clear in the job description. Then they can choose to self-select out instead of waiting a week and finding that out when they talk to someone.
Yeah, for sure. Do the candidates get any feedback as they're moving through and being screened?
Well, so you were mentioning RecFest earlier. So when I was presenting there, one of the things that came up quite frequently was around feedback. And we do have the ability to give pretty detailed feedback. We also have like practice interviews where you can practice and get a ton of feedback on that. But I know you're more talking about feedback in the interview process. So some of this does depend. There are some customers, it depends a bit on our customers. There's some customers that want to provide certain levels of feedback. There's some that are a little cautious about what's shared, but we are evaluating on both sides how these interview conversations are going and the quality of the response by the candidate. So there is a lot of data we have access to be able to deliver feedback to job candidates. And right now we're bundling that up in a kind of coaching tool that we're launching soon, where candidates can practice, they can get advice, they can even share their resume on the screen and get feedback on it.
I love it. It's not often that I hear people providing.
Leading a growing business, it's like building a plane while flying it. Team building, decision making, and scaling all at once. At CPO Playbook, we get it. That's why our podcast, ranked in the top 10% worldwide, tackles the toughest leadership challenges with insights to help you lead smarter and grow faster. Tune into the CPO Playbook podcast because leadership doesn't come with a manual, but we're pretty close.
That type of sort of candidate support within some of these tools. And so that's great to hear, because I think anytime you can help a candidate, sort of do better next time, even if they're not moving forward, I think that's a win, and it builds, sort of goodwill towards that employer brand as well. So I think that's great. Plus, like you said, with this ridiculous hiring volumes, you have no shortage of candidates. You have a shortage of quality candidates, and I think you're helping to improve the quality of the pipeline in the process. So RecFest. So these acquisition announcements were at RecFest or right before RecFest?
Right before, yeah. So
I'm
yeah.
sure everyone was dying to talk to you about all of that. In addition to you, speaking, which I know you've done before. What was the general sort of reaction? Were they just like, "God bless you," like for reducing the complexity of this ecosystem, or like what were some of the
Yeah, no,
feedback?
I was actually a little surprised at how many people had read the news. We're a smaller company here out of Seattle, but yeah, I know it was great to get as I presented, someone mentioned it, and we got a little clap. But I think a lot buyers don't want lots and lots of different tools, and I will say, if you like, even just within conversational AI, if you're using one AI tool for chatbot conversations with candidates, another one for SMS, another for human to human, you've really split the power of your AI into 1/3, 1/4, 1/5, because it's based on the training data, and these vendors are not sharing training data. So I think there's lots and lots of reasons to not have multiple tools. So I think that was met really well. And the other thing too is, with all the companies we've acquired, we've been partnering with them for quite a while. So we have had real customers where we're going in with this other company, and in many cases we've already integrated with. So we are getting a lot of feedback on what works with Humanly plus Qualify or Human. I think, beginning with what we were seeing from customers, because in I would 100% say what was driving us going into the M&A market was what customers were asking for and what they liked from us, combined with tool A or combined with tool B.
Yeah, you've given them fewer throats to choke, as they say, and you've simplified, integrations, because basically I guess they assume that you're going to take care of that sooner rather than later on their behalf. So that simplifies things. And you're right. You've got, when you talk about, I definitely want to talk about like sort of responsible AI, because I know you guys are huge proponents of that concept. And so, but yeah, I think the more you can sort of unify that sort of, data layer for, testing and further design and deployment, I think it helps increase the trust factor with your clients and prospects. So I think that's great. The like on the responsible AI front, I think you and I met at RecFest a couple of years ago when you were presenting with Microsoft on responsible AI and what that means. So I was curious, like when you go through acquisitions, because I know you made an acquisition last year as well, right? Teamable, I think it was. Yeah. When you look at these acquisitions and we think about being a trusted partner in this ecosystem, is that one of the factors that you look at? You look for other people like who are being responsible by design and have a similar sort of philosophy about human centricity and fairness and things like that.
Yeah, 100%, and particularly from making sure we're aligned with the folks we're bringing on. So from a people standpoint, we want to make sure that the strategy is very inclusive of building this in the right way. We have a lot of rigor around our process, and when we bring a company on, if it isn't doing all the things we want from a responsible standpoint, we can make sure we can basically make those changes. And then part of that is getting our audits to cover the full breadth of what we're doing. So I do think that that part of responsible AI, having a third party audit, is really important. And I think it's like should just like SOC 2 Type 2 and ISO are things that are standardized. I think making sure that from an ethical AI standpoint, an audit is done and you're able to prove to customers there's bias reduced. But yeah, that's certainly part of the calculus. And part of some of the initial deals we were working on before these companies were acquired, some of them had a lot to do with, like particularly in the Qualify case, a lot to do with buyers that cared a lot about ethical and responsible AI, and beyond even just compliance. Compliance is extremely important. Obviously, it has to be, but there's a lot of things that are beyond like what's required that I think can create an experience. So yeah, I mean, even when we're like taking, like you mentioned, the fundraise, even when we're taking investment from investors, we want to make sure that they're on board with what we're trying to do and build. And a big part of that is how we're doing that in an ethical and responsible way.
No, that's great. Yeah, I mean, I think just from a VC or a private equity standpoint, as you go to find new portfolio companies, I mean, it seems like that should be part of their due diligence as well, right? I mean, it's part of a risk mitigation strategy, and yeah, that makes total sense. On the human centricity piece, I mean, are candidates? I guess I'm curious, like what kind of feedback you get from candidates, or is it really all through your clients that you get that sort of anecdotal feedback, or do you survey candidates yourself?
We do.
Yeah.
And we find a lot of hiring process feedback from candidates. Oftentimes it like comes at the end of the process, and to really get actionable data, if you're able to get it like at each step. So we'll get feedback when you're done with our chatbot conversation. You can either give feedback on a particular answer if you're asking a question, but also on the experience. We'll average about a 4.7 out of 5. And so that is really important. And I'm also out in the world. I did a presentation 2 days ago where I'm meeting with a few hundred candidates. So I'm talking to job candidates a lot, which is a little different than some folks are doing. But yeah, it is very important that we understand the pulse of job candidates, and we're helping this process be easier because we know it just hasn't been working historically on either side.
Yeah, it seems like because you're now, if I sort of jump ahead, 3 months, 6 months, and I think about, the new sort of hiring platform that you have, architected here with the acquisitions, you've got a lot of like hiring intelligence kind of data, right, across everything from, the screening and sourcing with sprockets all the way through, what you've traditionally done, and then now with our work, stretching into post onboarding, like now they're not a candidate anymore, they're an employee, and all of that. So it just seems like you've got really rich data, not just the sort of quantity of data and all these candidate profiles and all these conversations and interviews, but again, the way it's sort of instrumented and the way you can see like what information you have at each phase. It really seems like you've got a lot of the elements that you might want for like a good quality of hire metric. Is that how you think about
what I very, very much consider us a data company, and I think if you're in AI, you kind of have to be. And the advantage we bring is we've been collecting, storing, labeling data for the last 4 years. So we have a lot of when we launch our AI interviewer, there's millions of either chat or human to human interactions where we can say, this is the anatomy of a strong interview for this role. Some of the things are simpler, like the ideal speed at which the interviewer is talking, over 150 words per minute, and you might lose a little cognition from the candidates where English is a second language are disadvantaged. So talk speed, but also what's being said from an employer brand standpoint that does vary based on role. What we're trying to do is we have templates around here's the best AI interview for this role, but then as we launch with a company, we want our tool to learn, okay, when I talk about this benefit with customer success candidates, that element of our employer brand's driving conversion the most with this. So So we wanted to then learn about the company. And with AI infrastructure, LLM infrastructure costs going down by about 1,000 over the, or yeah, 1,000, an order of 1,000, sorry, over the last 3 years. It makes it so that on the infrastructure side, we can deploy almost like small language models per customer. And then we have our IP, which is the difference between being able to talk to a human and actually recruit a human, which is where a lot of our data comes in.
So you mentioned the coach that would help the candidate. Is there a coach coming for the recruiter as well, or the interviewer? There is a human interviewer.
Yeah, good question. So there's a lot of, so the interview analytics space. So because we're trying to be in all the different conversations you're having with job candidates, again, email, SMS, video, there we have a lot of data. And right now, when we send a report about a particular interview, it's sharing, it's grading the candidate on a bunch of different categories, but we do have an optional section that's giving feedback back to the recruiters. And this is something we've been experimenting with for quite a while. It started in the form of a note taking and putting the notes in the ATS, but then the notes started now becoming summarizations. And we're working with a couple of folks, a lady named Dr. Catherine Hilton at Stanford is focused on linguistics. And there's a lot of elements of what interviewers are doing that could use feedback there. And we're also we've worked in the past with empathic. They measure empathy. So looking at, can you improve candidate conversion by being more empathetic as a recruiter? What does that mean? That means showing active listening in these ways, not being late to the interview. So there's a lot of data we have. I would say we haven't we're not leading by selling that, but as you use our product, there's a lot we can share with you through the product as well as QBRs and whatnot from a recruiter standpoint.
And then the sort of in-person interviews, at the tail end of the funnel, where there's interview intelligence tools is its own category. Would you go into that space as well?
So generally how we think about it is, if the main category we're trying to win is around conversational AI for recruiting, and then also having the apparatus to store and message candidates. But if we're talking about the conversations, we want to be in all of them. So the short answer to that is yes. The cool thing we find, though, is by being in all of them, we're finding not just like point in time, how good are you at human-to-human interviews, how good is chatbot doing, but there is a continuity element to how the interview happens that gives us really interesting analytics that all of them have to do with how do you increase the candidate's satisfaction and then how do you increase conversion. So like right now, all of our stuff is digital, so it needs to be over Zoom or Teams or Google Meet. We're not in any like devices like Alexa or anything like that yet, but
Right.
But that is the vision, to be in all conversations that are happening with job candidates and automating the ones that we feel and our customers feel should be automated, and then helping humans be better at the rest.
I don't know if this is just opening up a whole nother can of worms, but I've been talking to a lot of people lately, and this came up when I was at People Analytics World while you were having fun at RecFest. Social listening has had this sort of resurgence. I feel like starting with like the note takers, and hey, is everyone just sending their note taker to all these meetings and then they file it away, or is someone actually doing anything with all of that data? I mean, there's ideas in there. There's good questions. There's challenging questions. I mean, I don't know if there's gold, but there's probably silver and some other precious metals in there. And no one is doing a lot with that. I mean, do you envision getting into that space as well, where you're having, because now with our work, you're already stretching inside the firewall, right? So it's like, well, technically you could have it sitting in a hiring team.
Welcome to the Hire Her podcast, where women in talent call all the shots. We know, another recruiting podcast, just what the industry needs. Okay, but hear us out. You ever spend hours sourcing that perfect candidate, but they end up ghosting you harder than your hinge date? Or finally, you get that hiring manager feedback, only for them to, of course, say, "Can we see more candidates?" Lame, right? But let's talk about what's really lame in the industry. How is it that 65% of recruiters are brilliant women, yet most of the decision makers look like a convention for middle-aged dudes named Brad?
That's where we come in. Hire Her isn't just another podcast about hiring trends you already heard like 50 times this week. We're here to elevate women in talent, share their career journeys, and make sure they take the lead. Because let's face it, if recruiting is the backbone of every company, why are we still fighting for a seat at the table? So whether you're a recruiter, a talent leader, or just someone trying to swim through the sausage fest of TA leadership, we got you, girl. Welcome to Hire Her, the recruiting podcast where women's voices aren't just heard, but they're leading the conversation.
So subscribe now, because middle management Brad sure as hell isn't going to do it for you.
Meeting, if you didn't want to go outside of talent acquisition, like here's how we're debating, and then you have this AI sort of, not a debater, but you know what I mean, someone who can help to sort of rationalize some of the different thoughts or whatever. I mean, maybe you're already doing that. I don't know.
No, it's a good question. So like when I say we're at the heart a data company, and of course what we use the data for is to make the candidate and customer experience better. So we're of course not like selling data or anything like that. This is all aggregate, anonymized with consent. But what we do with it, there are a lot of potential applications in other use cases. So maybe you're having a performance conversation. Right now, we do like to us, being obsessed with the problem is much more important than being obsessed with the solution. And what we found is that it certainly takes a specialization to really get this right for talent acquisition for the roles we're targeting. And so getting into a new use case is something we would do if we felt that we can deliver it best in market, and we feel we can do that for recruiting right now. But the models we're building are very specific to the nuances of a job interview, a screening interview. It is really interesting, though, as we're getting into what we're using, like the post-hire data through our work. So once you start at the job, we have the ability to engage you to impact retention. But since we also know how you're doing if we're integrated into the HRIS, so what's the tenure for this candidate? What's their performance? And that allows us to then go back and say, so for the candidates that ended up being employees with the highest employee lifetime value, which is kind of a combination of tenure and a bunch of, I think Greenhouse invented the term, but these are the categories at your company that they're doing well in. So in the interview, so salespeople that do well at coachability questions end up being the most successful at your organization versus maybe years of experience, which might be different company to company. So the short answer is we've definitely thought about a lot of those, and we could go into more scenarios that are a little bit different, but not right now. Right now, we want to build the best video interviewer and the best conversational AI on the market.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. I mean, I think you play to your strengths, and if as things evolve, you want to enter that space and do it right, then go for it. But no, I think that's good. That's a good pragmatic approach. The candidate, just going back to like the candidate like research and engagement that you're doing, have you found that there's like particular either demographics or maybe culturally that there's differences in terms of the way they're or the rate at which they're accepting, this sort of AI interaction and evaluation?
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And we're looking at a lot of different slices of the candidate population we're working with. And hopefully I can speak more publicly about this soon, but there's a large tech company in Seattle, and they have a neurodiversity program. And we're working with what makes for the best interaction and for those types of candidates. So there's a bunch of different like years of experience. Are these new college hires? Are they more professional? So there's a lot of different slices we have, and we only have that data if the candidates choose to give it to us. But what I'll say is, one is particularly with folks with less experience that are maybe out of college, first job. So we kind of break it into first job, second job, third job. And right now, that's really the focus for us. We do see high mobile usage, and that's kind of across the board. But with folks that are a little more experienced. They're sitting behind a desktop doing the interview. In some cases, you might be doing those over the phone, or at least the chatbot screen over the phone. So that's one difference in modality. We find that most of our candidates are talking the most to our video interviewer versus voice only. So video with an avatar versus just chat where you're typing. And the reason that's important is the more they talk, the better chance we can fairly evaluate them, the more information they give us about them. So we're getting more of that content in an AI video interview, about 201 words per response, as compared to humans doing a phone screen, for example. So really what we're after is how do we give the most fair interview that produces the most inputted words per demographic. And another last thing I'll say is like with there's some candidates that are, and some of this varies by role, that are just want to do this without a human. There's others that want to do it with a human. There's some that might show up better in a video interview than in a chatbot conversation. Some people are better typers, some people. And the only reason, like right now in recruiting, you have the list is whittled down is because as you go from recruiting coordinator, recruiter to hiring manager, these people have less time and they're paid a lot more. So you can't have a hiring manager interview 1,000 people. But by automating it, you can have an AI like ours that is trained with the technical skills of a hiring manager, but the process, employer brand knowledge of a recruiter. And you can have 4,000 people go through a whole application to phone screen to video interview. And now you're grading them based on how they showed up in totality, not just how good they're at a phone screen. But if they're bad at phone screens, they're not going to even make it in the current process to the video interview.
I'm glad you brought up the neurodiversity community, because I do feel like that can be a challenge for people who think differently, whether that's, eye contact or just getting their thoughts out.
And Bob, one thing I'll say, because it was interesting to me, is in all the work we've done over the last 4 years in working with candidates with neurodiversity as part of their life, what we're finding is that everything that makes the experience better for them actually is just better for all candidates. So a lot of the things you do to kind of make it better or more inclusive to one group are actually just better for everyone. Like speaking slower might help the population of candidates where English is a second language, but it's actually better for everyone if the interviewer speaks a little slower. So
yeah, I mean, obviously, as we were talking about before, we want to make sure we're providing a fair process, and that's not just about across, visible, differences in appearance, gender, age, race, ethnicity, etc. So yeah, no, I think that's really important to not have anything that could cause that adverse impact against anyone wants a job. Prem, I wanted to ask you about just general, like going beyond humanly and where you spend so much of your time and energy, but just like as you think about like generative AI and the pace at which it's moving, I guess I'm just curious on a personal level, like if there are tools out there that you are particularly intrigued by that you might use, on the weekends or whenever you get a break, or like are there things that intrigue you or the things that concern you as AI advances?
yeah, good question, Bob. One thing I'd say is I think technology, and particularly non-deterministic technology like AI, it has the potential at its best to make things happen faster or more efficiently. You might have heard me talk about this a little bit at RecFest at the last time, but it can also, if you don't start with the right process and people thinking about it the right way, it can make things happen more efficiently bad. It can make bad things happen faster. And so you are, to a degree, scaling risk by scaling your use of technology. But if you do it right, there's tremendous potential. And I've seen a lot of, like, the tools I like, I've seen a lot of tools. It starts with just what am I already doing and how can I be better at it? So as cliche as it is, ChatGPT definitely had a big impact on my day-to-day life and research. And My wife started using it first, so I was at a disadvantage when we were trying to parent. But I was using a different one. But I think tools that help me be better at what I'm already doing is kind of where I start. But now we're starting to see tools help you do things that just weren't possible for, like interview 1,000 people at once. So I would say, like, right now I'm using a lot of like efficiency type apps. So like apps that can help me with how I present, listen to how I'm talking, Granola for note taking. I use a lot of like LLMs and yeah, for like I kind of have found myself to now be trained. So we have one of the templates on our hiring process at Humanly. There's a question: could this be done by AI? And I've actually found myself asking that question about many more things than I once did. So before I go and do something, or before I go and think about a problem, whether it's installing, like fixing a cabinet in our bathroom yesterday, I knew how to do it, but I'm like, maybe I should just ask. Maybe there's some better way. And oftentimes my life and my ability to fix cabinets is much better when I have a third party it being AI. So yeah, that's some of the stuff that I think it can help me just be better at what I'm doing, and then do things that just weren't possible. I'm like working 24/7 and stuff like that.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I every time I'm not 100% sure, I get sort of a second opinion, knowing, of course, that I need to be critical about
Of course,
whether
of
it
course.
knows what it's talking about either. It is your sort of know-it-all friend sometimes, doesn't actually know what it's talking about, but it's definitely getting better, though.
Yeah, I mean, as humanity, we've put the corpus of knowledge that we've created on the internet, and now it's a lot easier to make it useful using things like ChatGPT. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think, just tying it back to your advice and some of your background, I mean, the data, good data, practices, understanding, data quality, the provenance of the data, where'd you get it? And was it offered, sort of voluntarily? Did they opt in, as you said, the candidates do? I mean, I think these are all foundational to making sure that you've got the right fuel to put into your AI engine, as it were. So,
Absolutely.
Prem, anything else that you wanted to mention? I mean, I'll definitely obviously include your link to your LinkedIn and to Humanly in the show notes. But if there's anything else coming up that you want to talk about, is the coach on the horizon, or is that a little longer term?
So it is built, and we're launching with a few universities. If anyone is hearing this and interested in the beta, let me know. It'll eventually be on our website. And to that point, what I'll end with is, like, at RecFest and at other places, people often might ask me where I see recruiting technology going, and really I turn it to the audience, because it is going in the way that you are voting based on purchasing tools, based on a candidate's use of tools. And my job is simply to build what works for everyone out there, not to dream it up myself. So feel free to email me if you want to talk about that, if you have any feedback. Trying to talk to a lot of job candidates, and we can include my email as well in the notes. So.
All right, great. Well, Prem, thanks so much for spending some time with me. Congratulations on an amazing year, and best of luck to you and Humanly team.
Awesome. Thank you, Bob. I appreciate it, and thanks for everyone listening.
All right. Thanks, everyone. We will catch you next time.